Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the garden question and answer video that I do pretty much every Sunday. You can ask gardening questions in the comment section down below the video, and that's where I pick from each week. I think there's about 18 or something that I've written down for this week. Holly is out here with me. It's 26 degrees as I'm filming this, and I wanted to film this in the front garden here where all this color still exists for the next few hours. It's just going to kind of melt down, I think. The gomphrena and some of the salvias and that kind of thing that still are in bloom out here are going to melt down pretty quick today, and certainly over the next week or so, because we've got temperatures in the low 20s several times. Nothing was really acclimated to that. It's just going to, this is the first like probably extended week period of time where we've had nighttime temperatures below normal probably almost all year. I mean, we had nighttime temperatures in October, some nights in the 60s. In November, is that we were traveling, but I'm monitoring the weather here, you know, nights in the 50s, you know, even 2 weeks ago. And so, you know, this is a pretty extreme drop. Most everything in this garden's been here long enough, it's not going to have an issue. But, you know, it is interesting to be sustained low 20s in early December. That's actually well below normal. We usually don't get those kind of extended nighttime temperatures in a row until late December, early January. So anyway, the Learn to Garden video series, the weekly garden planner, are both $50 off over on my website, and t-shirts are 10% off, and I think there's like 7 different designs. Again, all over there on HortTube.com. Thank you for considering that. 2 videos back in the garden this week. One was a garden tour video, just showing off a lot of the things. Camellia's back here blooming. Lots of annuals still, you know, still in full bloom out here. It's interesting to come back home, you know, right at the very end of November and have everything this colorful. Again, it's 26 degrees right now, and a lot of this is just going to get knocked back pretty hard today. The other video was just a Friday video talking about how cold it was about to drop and taking care of a few things. You know, we were kind of prepared when we left. I thought I'd have more cold while we were gone than we did, but we just didn't. So anyway, let's go and jump into some questions. Somebody said, when will I start planting bulbs? Now that we're home. I want the soil temperature to be below 60, and I'm sure that it has probably not been below 60 up until now, and 55 is kind of the optimal temperature. 55 and below soil temperature is kind of the optimal temperature to put them into. So I probably, in years past, I would have definitely already done it by now, but this year is definitely, it's finally cold enough that I'd want to put them in. Here in the South, potentially, especially if you've got something in the refrigerator that you've been refrigerating, if you put that into warm soil, it has the potential to come up, and that's what I'm trying to avoid, is having the bulbs just immediately come up, you know, after putting them in the ground. I want them to stay dormant until February, or late January or whatever. So somebody's is shredding all of their leaves and sticks and twigs and any organic thing in their garden, you know, and leaving it and then reusing it for mulch. And they were wondering if any of those things could potentially be damaging to the plants in their garden. And so, you know, there are plants that are allelopathic. Allelopathic is the term for plants that can produce chemicals that inhibit seeds from germinating in other plants, or chemically prevent plants from growing underneath them. You know, walnuts are black walnuts are kind of famous for this, and magnolias, even forsythia, I think, produce some of those chemicals. There's a lot of plants that have developed techniques for trying to prevent other things from competing with them in and around them. But pretty much all of those things go away as things compost. So once you run these things through a shredder, and I don't know if you have any of these things that are allelopathic, but once you shred them and then put them out, they're good to go. My exception to this would be, you know, I probably wouldn't take my hydrangea macrophylla leaves that are just covered in leaf spot and then remulch my hydrangeas with that, you know, with that material. So if you have diseased things in your garden, maybe those things don't go, you know, through the shredder, and you know, burn those or send them off the property in some way, or blow them back into the woods, or, you know, however you want to dispose of them. That's not it's not putting them right back on your plants. But other than that, there's nothing in this garden, and most things are chop and drop here. Now, when these annuals die back, this is going to be so much material that this will go to a compost pile that I'm putting in back here in the back corner. But during the season, if I'm just cutting off a limb here, doing little pruning here, little pruning there, I just throw that material right under the plant. And so just do chop and drop, and that stuff just becomes mulch. There you go. So somebody added a male winterberry holly to their winterberry hollies to make sure they were going to get more berries, and their female winterberry holly now has so many berries that it's weeping over to the ground. Will this be self-correcting, or should they do something about it? So I always say on pruning, this is the perfect time, this is the perfect time to prune this would be such and such. But if a plant is in jeopardy of destroying itself, that's another time to prune it, okay? So get rid of in your mind when is the best time to prune something, once something's about to destroy itself. So I would take some weight off of it if it's pulling itself down to the ground, because potentially while those berries are on it, if you got any kind of ice event, or any kind of event that could pull it down even more, or heavy wind event with rain on it, it could potentially destroy it. You need to cut that stuff off. This evergreen dogwood that's over here, it stays so full of leaves in the wintertime that if we were going to get any kind of ice on it, I might come out here and lighten this thing a bit. It would cost me some flowers next year, but I don't want the plant to destroy itself, so that, I can enjoy it. So if it's in jeopardy of destroying the plant, I would get rid of it. Holly, what you doing, girl? She's a funny old dog. She's gonna be 16 next month, and she's still out here doing her thing. 26 degrees is the perfect temperature for her. Let's see. And the next question was, is the Empress of China blooming? I can see that the frost has toasted the blooms that were opening on it. I think this is in the frame, this evergreen dogwood over here. So it has stopped it from blooming, but it was blooming late. It's a really strange thing, but I can see all the flower buds, I think, are small enough that they can be protected through the winter. I think I'll still get the flowers in May and June next year, but some of them have opened. It just is what it is, and this frost will shut all that down. Frost and freezes will shut all that down. Let's see. So somebody had red twig dogwood, the Arctic fire one, and then the regular red twig dogwood that they've put in, and they were thinking about they were asking whether or not it will ever be single trunked. No, those are clumping dogwoods, and so you could probably work really, really hard at trying to make a single trunk red twig dogwood, but it's always going to sucker. It's always going to clump. I don't think it's going to look particularly good as any kind of single trunk to anything. But when you're this Chinese dogwood is can be a single. It's actually got 3 trunks down at the bottom, but this is a woody tree. Our native Cornus, Florida, is a woody tree, a small ornamental tree that becomes woody at the base and limbs itself up in time. But those red twig dogwoods are clumping shrubs. Still dogwoods, but just have a very different growth habit, and they colonize is what they do. Let's see. Several people were talking about the weekly garden planner in the comments last week, so thank you to those folks who have purchased it and then have promoted it down below the videos as being very useful. I really appreciate you making those comments. Let's see. Somebody has a Monty blue spruce, which is one of the dwarf blue spruce. I think it was in videos at Isley that we did last November. If you want to go back and look at the Isley video, I think the Monty blue spruce was in it. They have it in a pot inside. Should they go ahead and plant it now? I think they were in zone B. You definitely need to get it out from inside. When you have these kind of conifers in the house in the wintertime, they are going to be extremely susceptible to mites, to root rot, to all kinds of issues. There's not enough light. They really do need to be outside. So yes, get it outside and you can get it in the ground. It's even probably okay in the container. It's probably zone 4 hardy. So even in zone 6, it could stay as a container. It'd be better off outside. They were trying to jumpstart some growth on it and brought it inside. Now, you might want to acclimate it slowly. I'm not telling you to take it outside this morning if it's 18 degrees and, you know, put it outside immediately. Let it acclimate a bit back to it. But inside is not good as the light is lower and the days are shorter this time of year. You can get all kinds of problems on indoor conifers like that. Let's see. Somebody has a Calicarpa Americana. They're in zone 5B, 6A-ish. It broke off in some snow already. Will it come back? They're on the edge of where there's a Calicarpa Americana behind the camera right now. It's just sticks almost at this point, but and the birds have taken all the fruit off of it already. Will it come back? They're on the edge of where they're winter hardy, but probably having it broke off below the snow and down underground. It'll probably be root hardy through the winter time, but that's a question you can't answer until, you know, it pops back up next spring. You'll know when you know on that one, but you are on the edge of where it's hardy in the first place. It's one of those things you hope to have a season you hope to have a couple of seasons of growth on something like that. Once it was be in the ground like 2-3 years coming back, it'll probably tolerate almost any zone 5 thing you have. Okay. So somebody asked, after breaking a concrete slab, should they amend the soil down below it? So concrete is going to have lime in it, and that lime could potentially raise the pH of that soil for things that have grown in or around it. If the slab's removed pretty thoroughly, the answer is you got to get a soil test done. So you can't just assume that the pH is too high now or there's some other issue in that space. Holly, what you doing? Hey, Holly, come here, girl. You can't really assume that the soil's changed. You got to do a test and see if the pH has actually been raised in that area. The other thing that would probably happen though is going to be super, super compact. So I would get that soil covered, and if you could use wood chips, that would be kind of ideal, but you need to get it covered in something or potentially till it to start with. Again, I'm not talk about tilling a whole lot, but when you're starting a new space and it's super compact and there's no life in it, that might be a place where I would maybe till. You know, you could put a small amount. You could till it a few times and then put a small amount of compost on it and then till that lightly, very lightly into the top soil, not way deep down in the ground. And then get a soil test done to see if the pH is, you know, way off in that spot. Okay, so somebody, they're looking for Miss Lemon Abelia, which we have in the back garden back there. It's about 3.5 feet tall, 4 feet wide, something like that. Great Abelia. I've got Radiance next to there. We've got lots of different variegated Abelia in this garden. This is Suntastic Peach. I got Suntastic Peach, Suntastic Pink, Suntastic Radiance, and then Miss Lemon. But they see it in their area sold as Hopleys. So it has, and then they said Jerry Pittman at PDSI said they're the same plant. I guess one is being sold. Okay, so the name of this plant, the actual name of it is Hopleys, okay? But it's been trademarked as Miss Lemon, but it's also been trademarked as Twist of Lime, and that's the name that they see in Texas, is being sold under Twist of Lime. The Southern Living Plant Collection is selling it as Miss Lemon. And then they said Jerry Pittman at PDSI, who I know well, hang out with Jerry a few times a year, several events last year, said that they're the same, confirmed to them that they're the exact same plant. How could something end up with two trademark names? That's just the world that we're living in. A couple different ways this could happen. One is you could trademark it in Europe. This is one way this can happen. You could trademark it in Europe and then not be able to use that same trademark name in the United States. And so that is one way that I've seen this happen, where it's being sold as one thing in Europe. And then that, somehow that name ends up here anyway, even though the trademark was, already used. And then you just have, competing brands that are, trying to give something a name. Hopleys might not be a name that people would want to buy it off the shelf. A lot of times the patented name now will be like the breeder's name, with some sort of code next to it. That'll be the name it's patented under, and then it has a trademark name that it's sold as out in the world. So the Gomphrena that I showed in the tour video the other day is Fireworks Gomphrena. It's such a great name for that plant because it looks like fireworks going off above my fence over there. So everybody's looking for the name that, you know, that's catchy and will get people to, you know, to buy it. You know, Limelight was one of the great, you know, one of the great names of a plant because it talked about that, you know, it kind of in that same, just in the name of that plant, you get that lime green color and that flower, and then it turns white, and it's just like a beacon of light in your garden. It's just like the perfect name for a plant. Encore azaleas, you know, that's, you know, that because they continue to bloom. So names can go a long way in this business. So a lot of times you're just like looking at this patent name and going, man, that name is not gonna, nobody's gonna buy this plant with this name. And so you're trying to give it a name that gives it some sort of descriptive name in some way. And then of course, 2 different companies can then go out and trademark, put 2 trademarks on something. It's not ideal for consumers, obviously, but a lot of that, you know, trademarking in different, you know, in different continents, you know, can create multiple names as well. Let's see, and then, you know, something coming from Asia will have an Asian name on it that people may not going to use in the marketplace, and then it ends up with an English name, and then it gets confused as to what the actual name of the plant is, you know, back in Asia. So that's, you know, that's, things just get mixed up all over the place like that. So somebody wants to promote more leafy growth on their camellias in Houston because they're thin. So they have some Kanjiro, Sasanqua camellias. How do they promote more growth on it? Well, you're going to fertilize them in the late winter, early spring is the time to fertilize your camellias. And if they're thin, I would give them a bit of a haircut. So what we don't want is it continuing to extend, you know, thin growth going up. So March 1st, you know, I'm going to give them a little bit of haircut. They'll be long finished blooming by then. They're probably peak blooming now. And then fertilize them at the same time. Make sure they're mulched well. You know, Houston's probably a fairly tough environment for Camellia Sasanquas. I mean, the heat is, you know, it's pretty intense for these. A lot of these Asian temperate plants that are zone 7 to 9, really, there is a kind of a heat cap on them where they don't like it all that much. Let's see, somebody has lemon cypress. They're in North Carolina. They want to plant lemon cypress as a screen outdoors. They're sold everywhere, and that's true. I mean, you can't probably go in a garden center or box store right now where you're not going to see little lemon cypress Christmas trees. Those Monterey cypress or lemon cypress, they are Southwest natives. And so, you know, you have to think, sometimes we have to think about where the plant originated as to how it's going to perform in our gardens. And so that plant loves sand. It does not like wet feet. And so in potentially in our North Carolina soils, down by the coast, it's probably going to do better. So you're dealing with a plant that's cold hardy here in zone 8A where I'm at Raleigh, but it would not like our clay-based soil in the wintertime. And so that's the issue with them. And so we tend to see mites and aphids and other problems on those when we're growing them in the ground here, just from stresses that, you know, it's a Mediterranean plant, and this is definitely not a Mediterranean environment. The other thing was they were talking about making a screen out of them. I do have several videos over the years about using mixed screens. So even if you were going to experiment using one of these, even if you were going to experiment using lemon cypress as a screen, which, you know, go for it. Might as well. Again, they're cold hardy. Just want to make sure you're creating good drainage for them. I wouldn't use the entire screen, especially if you're questioning whether or not they grow well, because you don't see them anywhere, you know, out growing. You pick lots of different things for your screens if you can, and that way, if you do have an issue, whatever that issue is, you don't lose your entire screen at that time. Somebody says they have bright red leaves on their Loropetalum. That's pretty normal. This time of year, you're going to get some interior thinning on plants. Leafy evergreens, the evergreen dogwood, lots of yellow leaves in it right now. It's probably going to lose 25% of its leaves going into winter, which is good because it will lighten the load a bit on it. You'll see your azaleas will thin some. Loropetalum happen to have red coloration in the leaves, and so as the purple or the green coloration leaves in it, it's bright red, and so that's what you're seeing in there. It's thinning. It was dry for most folks this fall, and so that thinning is probably a little more excessive, but it's the same kind of thinning you get in conifers. You know, I don't have a conifer that I can point out right here where I'm at, but conifers tend to thin this time of year as well. It's normal thinning, but if it's like excessive amounts of it, like if you think it's like 50% of the leaves, that will tell you that a few weeks back or a couple months back, it was too dry going into the fall. And so, you know, but it would lose some regardless. And they on the purple foliage, Loropetalum, that color is bright, bright red in the interior of the plant. Somebody asked if I was going to Mance in January. This is the Maryland Nursery Trade Show, and it's the kickoff show for the year. It's always the first week in January in Baltimore. I go to that show every year. The next week after that, we have more regional shows, but Mance is like probably the biggest kickoff national show for trade show, and it's for garden centers and landscapers and media types to go and see plants. It's an interesting time of year. There's not a lot of color at that show, obviously, in January, so it's not really the big annual and perennial trade show. That happens in the summertime in Ohio, where that's kind of their show. It's the peak season for summertime. This one's more shrubs and trees, and I'm always at this event every year for about 4 days. And I've had a couple people over the years come and visit me at Mance. It's an interesting show. I mean, it's not a consumer show. It's mostly for landscapers, garden centers, you know, people to come and see. A lot of people booking their order, a lot of garden centers booking their orders for the season. They get to see the plants in person, meet new vendors, you know, because, you know, find new things to grow. A lot of plants get introduced, you know, during that show, but not as many as during the summer because a lot of stuff's asleep. A lot of the vendors are bringing, you know, dormant forsythia in January long before they bloom. It's not necessarily, you know, the most beautiful of trade shows just because of the time of year it is, but you can really see, you know, a lot of great quality growers, and a lot of the North Carolina growers are at that show. A lot of my friends, that's kind of always been kind of my favorite show, because my part of ornamental horticulture all these years has been woody trees and shrubs. And so that's the woody tree and shrub show, the national one. And look, so just tons of friends at that show. Okay, there you go. So somebody asked about winter watering of newly planted plants in zone 6. And is there a difference between watering deciduous and evergreen things? I think the main thing is, I don't know, I think they were in Missouri, is once the soil gains some moisture, once we get a few rains and the nighttime temperatures have dropped, the growth is shut down. You really don't have to do a whole lot of winter watering. You can, you know, maybe a container here or there may need some water during the winter time. Maybe something was super root bound when it went into the ground that you planted this fall, and you kind of observe those kinds of things as they're going in the ground. If you pull something out of a container, it's just completely root bound. That may be a candidate that you think about watering during the winter time, but I don't do any winter watering. Like, I can kick this, you know, I'm standing on this wood chip path here, and I can kick these wood chips to the side, and I see the ground is now moist. This was not the case 2 months ago. But now that the ground is moist, I'm not gonna really think about watering. So it's really getting to that moment in time where you've gotten some rain, a few rainfalls, and now the days are short enough and the nights are cold enough that you're not losing a lot of this water to evaporation. This doesn't mean you won't need to water at all. So do check on things. But again, I just kick the mulch. I mean, I can walk through here and go to this spot right here and just kind of kick the mulch to the side and then kick it back in place. I'll do that in 4 or 5 spots here or there in the garden. And if it all seems moist, I'm walking away from it and not doing any other winter watering. Last question for this week. And again, thank you guys so much for participating in the whole month of December. The weekly garden planner and the Learn to Garden video series are $50 off, and the t-shirts are 10% off over on the website. Thank you for considering those things during this gift giving season. There were a couple people that pointed out how, you know, in the videos from this week, how bloom resilient this garden is. You know, so I still, you know, I have some I'm not gonna have pollinators today out here because it's 40 some degrees, but if it was 65 degrees, this place would still have tons of pollinators on it. The length of time that this garden stays fresh looking has more and more and more over this 4-year period of time. Obviously, temperature has a lot to do with that. If we'd had a 25-degree temperature a month ago, you know, a lot of this stuff would have been knocked back already. But my season of this garden looking good is getting longer and longer and longer, earlier and later. And a lot of that is having to do with continuing to build this soil. The soil is the most important thing. And there's a lot of life in the soil. The plants being kind of crowded together a bit tends to protect them from the summer heat, you know, and then protects them, it being in a blanket, you know, of mulch and organic material is protecting it from the winter cold. And so my season is starting earlier, my season is ending later. The pollinators have a lot more opportunity in this garden, but that is, again, soil building is not instant. It can't be done, you know, overnight. These are things that I think is really, I think it's really hard in gardening, because the very first thing you want to do as a gardener is go buy plants. But the very first thing you should do in gardening is address your soil. And I'm not talking about making major changes to it, like dumping all kinds of, you know, nutrients on it. I've talked about that a lot. I'm talking about organic material, you know, getting the ground covered, getting it insulated, and giving the opportunity for life to start forming in there, for beneficial fungi and beneficial bacteria and all these things I've talked about for so long. That takes a long time, okay? It can take longer depending on your starting point, depending on if it's new construction and they've just destroyed the place, which there's a house being built a block from here. I should go over there and do a video on it. I won't point it out. But, you know, they've covered the entire front yard in gravel, and they've parked their trucks on it for months and months and months. It's just not a great environment to start from. It's going to take years for that soil to be less compact than it is for whoever's moving into that house. And so they would never probably do a garden like this, but if they were, it would take a long time. I'm in a neighborhood where you can grow vegetables in the front garden if you want to. If they wanted to do that, they basically almost have to do raised beds in the short term, because that soil will be so bad. So this just takes a while, but you'll notice as your soil improves, you'll see a season extension start to happen. You know, where your garden is, holds, you know, it lasts longer even during colder nights, and lasts longer during the heat of the summer. And, you know, it still looks good when it's 98 outside, and it also still looks good when it's 25 outside, more and more and more over time as your soil improves. So you're right in pointing that out, that this, I mean, if I walk around this neighborhood, most of the other gardens, even if they had flowering things in them, they've shut down much earlier. And it's because, again, it's not what you see out here, it's what you don't see out here that's helping all of that. So thank you guys so much for following along with the channel, and ask questions down below in the comment section, and I'll pick from those next week. Thanks.